This is not a block-by-block tutorial, but instead, I'll be teaching you Minecraft's basic mechanics as simply and as easy to understand as possible. Today, we'll be covering wither skeleton farming. To farm wither skeletons, you need to understand two main mechanics: the wither spawning conditions and how to move them. There are three spawning conditions for the wither skeletons. First, it can only spawn in nether fortresses, it needs a light level of 7 or below, and finally, it needs a solid block with 3 air blocks above it. Now, a nether fortress isn't as simple as you might think. There are certain structures in the nether fortress that have different bounding boxes. What are bounding boxes? Well, bounding boxes are the invisible area that the game recognizes as part of a structure. Let's take this walkway for example. Without the bounding box being shown, you might think that the pillars of the walkway are part of the nether fortress. But in reality, the pillars aren't part of the nether fortress bounding box. So, if you're trying to maximize your farm by building a spawning platform down here, wither skeletons will not spawn. And vice versa. Up at the top of the walkway, up to 4 blocks above the actual walkway is still considered part of the nether fortress. Meaning that if you set up blocks on the top layer here, wither skeletons will still spawn, even though it looks like the area is not part of the nether fortress anymore. What I'm using here is a mod called MiniHUD. Unfortunately, there's no way of detecting the invisible bounding box without using this mod. So, if you really want to maximize your spawn rates, the mod link is down in the description. Now that you know how and where a wither skeleton can spawn, let me teach you how to maximize your spawn rates. As covered before, you can use the MiniHUD mod to figure out the bounding boxes and the optimal location for your farm, like the intersections. These intersections has a bigger bounding box than the actual structure itself. The bounding box extends up to 7 blocks diagonally from the edge of the intersection. This is why most guides and tutorial videos tell you to build farms in these intersections. And secondly is what we call spawn proofing. Spawn proofing is blocking other areas outside of the fortress so other mobs cannot spawn. Why? Because there's something called a mob cap. For a more in-depth guide on mob caps and mob spawning in general, check out this video. Basically, there can only be 70 hostile mobs at one time in a single player world. So, if your fortress is surrounded by areas that other mobs can spawn on, like the piglins, pigmen, and ghast, it will naturally lower the amount of wither skeletons that can spawn in your farm. So, how do we spawn proof them? Well, there are 3 ways that we can spawn proof your wither skeleton farming. The first 2 is what I call passive spawn proofing. Basically, what it means is that you choose an area where there's no spawnable blocks within 128 block range of the player, like a fortress in a lava ocean. There are no other spawning areas except the ones on the fortress. This will ensure that mobs can only spawn on the fortress. The other one is spawn proofing by using a fortress in a specific biome, like the Soul Sand Valley or the Basalt Deltas. Because pigmen and piglins cannot spawn in the Soul Sand Valley or Basalt Deltas, you've already slightly reduced the amount of mobs that can spawn near your fortress just by picking the right biome. The last one is the hardest one to do, which is actively placing down slabs, stairs, or glass on valid blocks to prevent spawning. This also means that you need to spawn proof the fortress itself because pigmen, blazes, and ghast can still spawn on nether fortresses. When you've picked out an area to set up your farm, it is recommended to spawn proof the rest of the area that is not part of your farm. You can also go a step further and spawn proof the farm itself by using wither roses. Why? Because only wither skeletons can spawn on wither roses, meaning there will be no other mob that can spawn in your spawning platform. Now that you know everything about the spawning mechanics, I will teach you on how you can move them. Same as other mobs, wither skeletons can be picked up by minecarts or transported through portals. But minecarts are a big hassle, so you can use their aggro mechanic to lure them into a killing chamber. Some of the mobs that the wither skeleton are hostile towards are piglins, piglin brutes, snow golems, iron golems, and baby turtles. Also, all types of wolves can scare the wither skeletons. So, you can pick and choose which mob you want to use for your wither farm. I hope this was easy enough for you to understand, and I hope that you learned something new. If there are any questions or if there's anything I missed, please let me know down below in the comments. Peace.